All right, guys, Sam back with you here Friday, May 4th. Next up, we're going to take a look at Ripple to the US dollar. Now, we haven't looked at this in a bit. It's been a couple of weeks at least. So I've got it here. This is Ripple to the dollar on Bitstamp. Now, I'm looking at a longer term view. One thing that I think is kind of interesting, and it's why it's always a good idea to always pull out and get some perspective, is take a look at where we are right now. So here, the green line, right, as I'm sure you well know, is current price action. Look how we're hovering at this prior level here that seemed to be of significance to this market. So prior resistance becomes support, potentially now resistance. It's interesting, it's always a good idea, when you see something like that to wick that off, because you'll be surprised how often that will come back into play as the market moves. So now here we're operating on the premise that we have a good pivot here. So if I work down here to my absolute low, which I think I've got tagged, certainly the potential now here, as we are seeing in all of crypto, is that we have the start now of a new trend after this very brutal long correction. So is this the start of a new trend? Well, let's go dig in a little bit. I'm going to go back down, look at the 2 hour, working off of this low. Now let's open it up a little bit here so we can get a better look at it and say, okay, well, what are the obvious things that we can look at and we can identify objectively? Well, this here is a little bit of a challenge. Only it's almost identical to what we see in Bitcoin. So that question of, is this 1-2, or do we essentially have a double bottom here? Now in Bitcoin, it would appear, based on what we're seeing in the price action on Bitcoin, is that it's going to end up as a 1-2, and that this is a 3 and we're putting in a 4 before we go higher. So I'm inclined to lean that direction here because of the consistency. So if you look here, the question always was from this low down, so you can see a 1-2. So let me label it for you so it's, come on, easy to spot. So you can see here we had the 1, the 2. Where's the 3? So it's not unreasonable to think that you've got a truncated. Let me zoom that up a little bit. That you have a truncated fifth down there. That's how what I thought we had, because you had this good relationship here between the 2 and the 4. Right? Actually, one contender was that you had the 3 here. This is how I had it in Bitcoin. So you had the 3, then you had an A, B. Because there was 5 in this, I had that as the C, which comes right into the 38, which takes us down here, which means we don't actually have a truncated fifth. It puts slightly beyond this 3 on the assumption that I have an expanded flat in the B. Right, so I had been leaning that way with Bitcoin. Looks like that's not going to end up being the case, and that the more obvious count is going to dictate. So maybe that's me just trying to outthink the market and just getting a little too fancy, when perhaps the obvious choice was the one that ultimately is going to play out. But I was drawn to the idea that we came to this 38 to the tick, right to the Vegas wave. Well, we're not going to know until we see how this resolves. But right now, so your question is, well, why does that matter? Well, it matters to a small degree in that if this is a 1-2, right, so where we would be pulling any potential fib swings, it's subtle, but the broader question is, if we finish like this. Right, so and then this is 1-2. Well, then this is 3. Then this, as we're seeing in Bitcoin, is a 4. So to put that into the proper degree, let's get this set. So we'd be working off of this count. So we'd have 1 very deep 2, granted very deep 2, but it stays internal. So technically, still an internal retracement. And then we've got all this subdivision here. Even this would appear like that's A, B, C. I'm inclined to do that, and the 5 is going up here, and this is A expanded flat. Now, not to lean on that too much. I would want to be measuring in here. So if I look at my subdivision in here, let me get this down to green. So we'd have to look at it like this: 2, 3, 4. Then we're up for the 5. Now I do see this as an expanded flat. That's what I see. A wave, B wave, expanded down for the C. Now let me get the wave off of that. Now, if that's accurate, we should be able to identify, there should be some tells to help clarify whether or not I've got that right. So first we'd be looking for a relationship between the 2 and the 4. So let me see if I put my little that makes it easier to grab the swing. So if I go down here to my proposed 2 and I look up to my 3, I can get it right on there. All right, so here we come right to the 38, but I think we get that infamous truncated C here. So we get AB, we get a shallow C. Well, you can see here we are literally to the tick. All right, so if you're thinking about where that might go, and we're looking for technical confluence, to the tick here, again, that kind of has me leaning towards this as my third. I've got an A, I've got a 3-wave B into an expansion, and then we come down for the C. So that's what I'm seeing. It's just this, I would propose to you, is coincidental that we're happening to hit the algo target from the top side down. But if that's a 3, right? So if we work for my 3, now I've got to go from here. I've got to go back to this as my 2, right, which is damn near the absolute low. So if this is my 2, that's my 3, and I have this identified correctly, then the fact that we pivot just a few ticks shy of the 38, so it's one of two things. So either the C is here, right, and we've done this, and so we have A, B, C. So thinking yet again as a corrective A, B, then down for this C here. So that would be, I got that one of these is in the wrong place. So this one would be over here. So that would go here. Now let's change that. Give me a second here, guys. Okay, so that would be A, B, C here. Let's go to a blue on that. So here's A, B, C on the second time. Again, looks almost identical to Bitcoin. Let's take that up so it makes sense. Okay, so there we go. So the larger, so then we've got an A, B, C here. So A, B, oh, Jesus, if I got this wrong again. Yeah, that's what I'm after. Sorry, guys, sorry. Trying to make it make sense. All right, there we go. There it is, the ABC. Okay, so if that's our ABC, what all the point of all that is, well, this is much more typical of what we'd expect to find in a fourth wave. This sideways, indecisive, range bound, trying to get the energy together to get a fifth up here. We can do some projections. If I can do a couple of things. So I can look at any relationship between my wave 1 projected from the proposed wave 4. Well, we see we get a bit of confluence up here at the algo target. I've got my 2618 up there. Now, granted, that's an extreme. No doubt about it. That's an extreme. We can also just look at this and think, well, what else? Are there anything else to help me identify these pivots down here? If that's a 4 and we're going up for a 5, I can additionally, just trying to think, what additionally can I help identify here? Well, this is anything from between my B and my C. Well, we go deep here. We're going through the 786. Excuse me. We're come just shy of our first algo target. Here's our third algo target. It's not perfect, right? So I'm trying to zoom in on, how is this a good pivot for me? So I'm going to go down to the hourly. Let's see if I can zero in on anything else to help me there. So when I've got this many pivots and I have retracements of this depth, that's bugging me. Let's do this, actually. I'm going to take this up a degree. All right, so if I've got this right, this pivot is kind of a question mark. So when I have this many retracements that are this deep, well, I got to look at some market geometry. So if I take my absolute high here and I go down to my proposed C low and I work to my B. Now, one thing that you have to do with pitchforks / median lines is you got to get them right on. So this can be helpful. I find the magnet somewhat annoying when I'm trying to work quickly because it's too grabby. But when I want to dial in on something specifically, it can be useful. So looks like I've got that correctly. So those so they're spot on. So let's pull back out. Okay, so now I look at this and I think, how is that helping me? Is this implying strength? So we know Andrew's median line trading principle number 4 is that a failure to make the median line implies strength and suggests a move equal to or greater than the move down that failed to get there. So equal to or greater than that. Oh, I got my magnet on. See, there's a good example of why I don't like the magnet on. Okay, so equal to or greater than. Well, we've already done greater than. So that's one way to read that. I might, also want to check over here. Kind of interesting, right? So if I'm working from this pivot, if I get that, again, you got to get it spot on there. If I get on that pivot, well, look, I'm damn near to the tick. So that kind of gets my attention. So potentially here now I'm adding some validity to the idea that I've got a technical pivot. Now, here's something else. Again, you're trying to build, it's always about trying to build a case. What else can I use to help me identify that? Well, I can see I've got a pivot here before I go up to this high. That kind of gets my attention. So I can look at it two ways. I can work from the absolute lowest pivot here, right? So remember, an algo isn't worried about whether I've got an A, B, C, and a truncated C. It's just looking for the lowest pivot. What's the last low before we move higher? And this is a higher low. So if I work from the absolute low here, look at this confluence that I get right here. So I get almost technical perfection, right? So I get an absolute a tap of the 50, just what are we, 2 ticks away from the median line, and then I get that rip. Interesting, right? So what else can I do here? So, I noticed this again, just looking at this, I would want to check here, if I'm going down here, get that right on it. So we look here, so as we identified that, so do I have these right on? Again, you got to kind of go through doing this just to make sure, see how they're not spot on. They got to be spot on to get that. So that looks like spot on there. Okay, now pulling back out. Well, again, this here from this pivot clearly having some significance. If I work from here, well, of course I got to check a modifier, right? So the fact that we don't catch it there immediately makes me think, let's check the modified shift and see if a channel would have done anything for me. And note what we get here. So I have additional, so if I zoom in on that, it's pretty remarkable, right? So let me take this off so you can see it. So we have this little pocket here where we are intersecting a modified shift and a traditional, and we're just going right between the two to tag the 50%. So, as I would like to propose to you, that's highly unlikely that anything other than an algorithm can make that buy there. That's one, I promise you that's not random. That's not just, oh, what a coincidence, happens to tick the 50 exactly at an intersection of two median lines. That's an algorithm that's buying there, right? That has that kind of precision to buy. And look at the reaction coming off of that. Now, also take note here. Now we're getting into lower volume. This would have been of interest down here as well, as we have this very low volume node here now, but remember, the volume profile here is doing visible range. So if I put the entire range in here, here I'm coming down here to where I'm going into lower volume. But this technical precision here, really pretty remarkable, right? If you think about that, how precise that is to get into that tiny little pocket, just to get to the 50. Right, just to get to where we can get that intersection between those two median lines and a perfect tap from swing low, from the lowest low to this high. It seems like this is an important high. Is this, per our count, that's our third. And then we get a perfect tap here from it. So, just kind of, I find that absolutely fascinating, and I would propose to you that's what is that? Those are algo footprints. Nothing more than that. So let's take some of this off now that we've identified that, right? So I've made the case there that we have this good pivot. So this gives me strong confidence that working from that pivot, I've got my next pivot should be significant. So if I consider this, so I have a couple of choices to make. One, if I'm working swing low to swing high and I hold here, the precision of that has me inclined to hold. So, there's two choices. One is to go to the higher high, right? Well, here it's not too far off. But my guess is that what they've done here is because we had this reaction here at this 50 relative to swing low, swing high, and we've come back down and tapped the 50 perfectly here, that the algos are still working off of that swing, right? So as this move here is unrealized. All right, so I'm inclined to think that this will be a meaningful pivot. Now, I've also got this confluence zone up here as well. So if that doesn't play, if I don't get that spot on, I would definitely consider that one. Now, look what happens here. So you've got now, a decision to make here, right? So is this, you won't know until you see the reaction. If I don't get a reaction there, well, then we got to consider this one. The fact that I have more confluence there, something to consider, right? As we built that confluence zone previously. So we got to consider all those alternates. So let's take this off because it's not really in play relative to what's next. So what's next? Well, if we're in the process of putting in the 4, we're looking to come off of this with some sort of emotive wave, whether we have a 1 of our 5th, right? So then we could have a diagonal, or whether we're going to get an impulse coming off of that 4 to take us up to, right? This is just a hypothetical. We don't know that the 5 tops there, but that's a candidate. Well, so of course, I'm going to work a pitchfork off of this, right? Because I hope by now that goes without saying. So if I look here, there's my modified shift. So I'm going to go to original, looking for some upper targets. What do I get? Well, that's kind of interesting. So again, you got to be spot on those pivots. So we've come just shy of the median line, and we're getting a little bit of a retracement. So is that suggesting weakness, failure to make the median line? Well, I would look at that and say, okay, can I get into this anymore? And is there anything here I can work with? Well, so there it is again. You got to get right on it. And it's prone to moving a bit when you change time frames. So it looks like those are good. So what do we have here? Well, something that was, so again, working backwards. So look, here's my first deep retracement. Here's my second retracement. Well, could that be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Sure looks that way. So if I grab my wave tool and I go, well, why would you assume anything other than, well, there's a 2. Looks like I've got some sort of move up here to a 3, back down to a 4, and then could be that's my 5 here, and we're just going to come shy of the median line. That's possibility, implying weakness, failure to make the median line, trading principle number 4. It's kind of interesting that I'm holding here as an impulse, as I've not threatened the 1. So, remains to be seen whether I've got another kick. Remember this yellow line? That's where we started, that yellow line that I was talking about coming back into play. Interesting. All right, so here's my 3rd. So looking for a relationship. Well, do I have anything to work with here? If this is my 2 to my, wrong one. I want this one. I want straight retracement. So from my 2 to my 3, well, right to the 38 for the 4, exactly. I mean exactly to the tick where you'd expect it, and then boom, we go to algo target. So do I have this? There it is. All right, so 38, algo target, retrace. So, again, as I'll often tell you, you want to trade these until they fail. Well, there's the first break of the 65. So that would imply to me weakness, since the algos will now have flipped. So I'm inclined to go this direction here. So looks to me like I may be complete now on my, let's move this up. I may be complete on the 1 of the 5. All right, now let's put that all into context. If I'm still trying to get up to these upper targets, well, how am I going to get there? If this is 1 of 5, let's go down a degree here so this is in context. Okay, if that's 1 of 5, well, from swing low, my 4 low here, I'm going to go to my proposed 5 high. Again, can't be absolutely certain, but it certainly looks like I've completed here. Let's go. I'm going to go down to the 30. We get a little more detail. Okay, let's pop this up. All right, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Now coming down for the 5. Well, what are we looking for? From swing low to swing high, I'm looking for the 50 as a minimum. So I've got this whole pocket in here because I'm playing this now as a 1, 2. I'm playing this as the 1 wave of the 5th wave. So I'm trying to get up here. Well, how am I going to do it? Well, if that's my 1 wave, I've got to map it out this way. So let's change the color. We'll go to green here. So if that's a completed 1, then I'm looking for 2 minimum at the 50. I'm going to go up 3, 4. How can I get there? Well, there's a roadmap to get me there. Okay, so let's pull some of this off. So that I've got just to declutter the chart. Just take some of this out. We'll leave the median lines in. Looks like I'm slightly off here again. Okay, looks like that's going to be right on it. There we go. Okay, so if that's 1, I'm looking for a 2 somewhere between the 50 and the 618. So here's the zone I'm looking for. Right down in here is my buy window. Can I come down there in 3? Well, it looks like I've already done a little ABC. It would be shallow here. So if I open this up and look at what we've done, I can see a little ABC already going in. Let's open this even more. So you can see ABC. Now, my first inclination would be that that's just the A wave going in, B, and then we come down here for a C. Let's go down a degree. That's a little much, so to get our wave on it. So that's what we'd be looking for. A little kick up here for our B. It's always an attempt to get to new highs, right? But if we roll back over, then that's exactly what we're looking for. So the opportunity for that C wave sets up down here. Now we're kind of interesting on the geometry. We'd be coming down to challenge the lower parallel, potentially getting into this pocket between the lower parallel and the 1.5. Here's where I set up between my 50 and my 618. I might look for, I don't have anything to project yet on the B, but if that's going to retrace, I'd work from this high to this low, looking for something up here around the 618, right to my golden zone. Now, if I get that, and I do not know where that's going to pivot. So based on where that pivots, then that obviously affects, what I'm targeting here. We don't know, right, where that's going to pivot, but that's a reasonable target. So I actually get a little bit of a confluence zone tightening now, as I've got an algo target if we pivot up here. If we pivot and come back down, now I get a tighter cluster here for confluence. So all I'm trying to do is dial in where's my buy zone. I want to create a hot box here. So if I come into that, I want to anticipate a reaction coming out of that, because I'm looking for now the 3rd of the 5th. So the idea is to be there for that. That's what we're looking for if we can catch it, right? It all lays out rather nicely. I've got the potential here for my 4 to be in. I know I've got a technical pivot by all that confluence we identified previously. Now, you could think of it in simple terms. I'm just looking for the next 50 from the move off of this low to this high. I mean, it really is as simple as that. Where's my next 50? What I'm doing now is I'm using Elliott Wave to try and identify and come into that spot with precision, looking for these patterns that are prone to repeat and looking for those probability zones, so that if I get the pattern relationship that I'm looking for, as in 3 waves correcting the 5 wave motive that I had coming off of that low, well, then I've got a trade that is at the very least worth considering. So where are you wrong? How would you know to get out of this? Well, to some degree here, you've got to use some risk reward. So if I were to go all the way down here to the other side of the 65, just thinking in terms of just any straight algo pull, buyer on the front side of the 50, stop on the other side of the 65. Well, here's my wave 1 high. That's not relevant now on the assumption that I've completed a 5. So this could be going deeper. So the maximum you could give it here, maximum would be to the other side of the 65. Don't have to give it that much. So it's just that's to some degree. I might see if you either have to go really tight, or you got to look at these levels and go, are those potential magnets for the market? So you wouldn't want to put it just on the other side of the 50. Really, well, let me phrase that. I wouldn't put it just on the other side of the 50 for the fear that you might get a little wick that comes down here and then get yourself stopped out because you're so close to the 50. Then the blue line here, you've got your second algo target if we're going to pivot up here, come down for a C, and then I've got my next 65. So these are all potential pivot zones. So you got to pick something. So if you're going to give it the maximum amount of room, I'd go to the 65. But then you got to think about, well, all right, if I'm going to give it that much room, what kind of upside do I have? Well, here would be, this would be a minimum target here, coming up to the first algo target. Second, we'd be really looking for the 3rd here. But, if I'm going to get a 1, 2, and I'm going to get a 3, so you could just measure and start looking for, well, if I'm going to get a 3, now you're into hypothetical mode here. So if I've got my 1 in, I'm going to get down and get my 2 here. Well, where could I be going? Well, my 1618 is way up here. So and we don't know, but if I'm going to get up there to that kind of level off of this, look at the size of my 1, off of this to a 2, and I'm going up into that high probability zone where I might catch my 618, 175. Well, now I start looking at that risk reward and say, well, if I'm a buyer here and I'm just going to split the difference between the algo target and the 50 and think about what my upside potentially is, and then I'm stopping out on the other side of the 65, well, there's 8.8 to 1, and we're not even quite there. That might be closer to 9 to 1. Yeah, it is. There's just about 9 to 1 here if I get up to the 618. So let's put, is that reasonable? Does that make sense? Let's take some of this off and just declutter a bit. We got this on. Just think about it. Okay, does that make sense? Could that be what's in play here? So if I look at this whole thing, now put it into the broader context of where I'm trying to, I've got several targets up here. I've got targets off of this low. I've got targets off of this low. I've got my market geometry. Look how they all kind of line up, right? Are we going up towards that upper parallel? Right, that would put the 3 up here. Let's play it forward. This is all now. Whoop, that's all now moving. Come here, moving up from the 3-4. If that's my 3-4, and we're going, and this is we're going. All we're doing is putting in the 1. You know, I got some upper targets up here. So you think about where it could be going. So if this were to play as my 4, and then we're going up for a 5. We're trying to catch the 3rd of the 5th, right? Then you'd be anticipating a move back down here. This would be very reasonable here. I'm going to guess that would be right around the 38. And then you're looking for that last move up to put in the 5th. So now going all the way back out, let's go back to a 2-hour and put that in context. Does that look realistic, right? So now you put it here, doesn't look like it's that much of a move. Right, so that's why you always want to pull out a little bit and say, well, if we're doing that, this could all just be a 1 wave. We could from this low, we most likely, if we're going to continue to rally here, all we're doing is putting in a 1 wave. Right, just of the larger degree, that's a 1. Right, working off of this technical pivot down here, working off of that low. All we're doing, all of this work is just putting in a 1 wave. And then, of course, we got to consider the retracements on the way back. So it looks like we're through. Let's check it. We might be through that one. Yeah, we have just so you can see the wick here on the B just barely gets through. If that's going through, well, then I got to go up to the next one. So look here, candidate here, 50. So from my swing high to my swing low, here's the next resistance point. Coincidentally, now you zoom in on that and you think, does that make sense? Well, wouldn't surprise me at all. Now we put that all together. So our target up here for the 3rd would be right at the 50, retrace. Then we're trying to get through the 50, go up and challenge the 618. So there it is. I mean, that's the whole process of how do we construct this thing using Elliott wave, using these wave relationships, these tendencies, these patterns that are prone to repeating, and we can use the statistical analysis of that frequency to put together an entire roadmap. Now, just because we put it together and it makes sense and it's logical and we apply all the Elliott rules, it doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen, but it just means that we have a potential roadmap here that is if you think about it, if we start to follow this, we have an unfair advantage. We can see exactly what's most likely to happen here. Now, this can break down at any point. At any point, you can have a breakdown. Then you have to reevaluate, relabel. It happens all the time. That's just part of trading and part of analysis. If not this, then what? Right now, this looks like the most likely path getting up to some of those targets. But it's nothing more than that. So you got to think about, where can I take a business-minded risk? What can I put capital at risk here? What kind of downside am I looking at for what potential reward? 9 to 1. Again, why would you not take that trade? Unless you're just a raging bear, either a crypto bear, or you're just anticipating we're all going back down here. Right, and so here's the 38, right? So if of that pivot that I drew, right? So that one that I drew just all the way back up here, right? So all we've done is here we're at the 38. Maybe this is all just corrective before we head back down. That's not what I see. I see that. Right? And until that breaks down, I stick with that roadmap until I see some invalidation or something that happens to cause me to think, well, now it cannot be that. And there's the value in Elliott Wave right there. It's the absolute definitive nature of that rule set. If this happens, it cannot be that. If that happens, it cannot be this. It's by staying and maintaining that discipline to hold those rules lets you organize the chaos and lets you find probabilities, probability zones where I can enter with this kind of anticipation, where I can do that calculation, where I can do the risk reward and say, well, is that reasonable? Because at this point, then my analysis, I can say with absolute certainty is wrong. This labeling cannot work. So what would work? Right, that's your next question. Right now, no reason to think otherwise. That all we've done is just put in a 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're fighting to get that 5. That completes. Well, what have I got? I've got a completed 5-wave structure. What's next? 3 waves. Buy it at the 50. It's not simple and it's not easy, and you're going to be wrong more than you're right. But when you lay something out like this, you truly do have an unfair advantage. And when you start to see this follow, you have the advanced roadmap. So think about it. All right, if you want to learn how to do this kind of analysis and really develop fluidity with it, I like that word, fluidity, although it's kind of hard to say. We do offer a lot of resources for you. Of course, we have our members Discord where we are analyzing this, on the hard right edge of the market. Right? So a lot of what I do here is just teach you this methodology, and then every video is a real-time application of everything that we're teaching in the Discord. But there is a lot there to offer to you as a potential member. You can learn about that. You come over to our website at Trade Devils. That's plural, tradedevils.com. Learn about it there. Everything from the members Discord to one-on-one coaching, and some new educational content that we're working on, and we're always trying to make the experience better and communicate the information to our students so that they can grasp it and ultimately not need anyone's counsel. That's kind of the idea. All right, guys, that'll do it for today. I hope you found that useful. Some trades to keep an eye on. All right, talk to you.